Hi, I read the book Hatchet by Gary Paulson. In this book, Brian Roman gets in a plane wreck after his pilot has a heart attack. He has to survive for a long time before he is saved. He encounters lots of danger, learns lessons, and learns that he loves the outdoors. In the first scene, Brian's pilot has a heart attack. He flies for as long as he can, but eventually runs out of fuel.
Stomach. We're out of gas. Ew!
In the second scene, Brian finds a food source. They are called gut cherries. He thinks they are a good food source, but they have a horrible twist to them.
Okay.
In the third scene, Brian is puking his brains out. It turns out that the gut cherries were making him puke. In the next scene, Brian finds a new food source. But at his new food source, he finds a friendly bear. He nearly has a heart attack. The bear and him just stare at each other for a minute. In the next scene, Brian heads outside early to go fishing, only to find a mother moose getting a drink. Brian is spotted by the moose and is attacked. In the last scene, Brian swims out to the crashed plane that is floating on the surface and finds a survival kit. It has an emergency transmitter and a rifle. He presses the button on the transmitter and it doesn't do anything. He thinks it is broken.
Action.
Oh yeah.
To end the book, a plane comes and saves Brian after receiving his emergency transmitter. I wasn't a big fan of this book because it didn't have very much action. Thanks for watching. This production is sponsored by Coke. This is Brian's interview with Dr. Phil after he survived the nature.
Welcome to the Dr. Phil Show. On today's show, we'll be interviewing Brian Robinson on the occasion of he needed another minute and 20 seconds for his book report. Brian Robinson, passenger on a Cessna 406 on his way to visit his father, when a tiny bush plane crashes into the Canadian wilderness. With nothing but his clothing, a windbreaker, and a hatchet, Brian finds himself completely alone. His story being recorded in this book, Hatchet by Gary Paulson. Let's welcome, with a warm round of applause, Brian. Now Brian, what was the worst part of your ordeal?
Well, I was alone with no communication with the outside world and little hope of any help. Despair was the worst part.
Brian, what surprised you the most about that Canadian wilderness?
The mother moose. The moose was the strangest, most violent animal I've ever encountered.
The mother moose. Okay. How did you spend your time?
After finding food, I would sit on a rock on the lake shore in my underwear. Well, actually, I would sit naked.
You would sit naked on a rock. Okay, naked in your underwear, huh? Brian, that thought makes me want to put my head in a blender. Now, before I do this, time for a break and a message from our sponsor. Welcome back, and with only about 20 more seconds to go in Nathan's book report, we are talking with Brian, who is stranded alone after his plane crashed in Canada. Now Brian, how did it feel to be rescued?
It felt great. I am so glad to be home. The Canadian wilderness is so beautiful, and I will enjoy going back on a fishing trip with my grandfather sometime. I will also miss the blueberries.
So, after staying in the wilderness and almost dying multiple times, because of a mother moose. You want to return to the wilderness.
Yes.
Well, thanks for everybody for coming out. That's our show for today, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Dr. Phil Show.